Hi, welcome to Hey Look at My Thing with Keeghan Reynolds, Rachel Bennett, and Aaron Irons. On this podcast, we share things we are enthusiastic about with our friends. And this week, we're talking about Rex Stout's Nero Wolfe. Is that right? Did I do the right words?
Yeah, you got it. That's good.
I did the words! All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back. Today, I will be sharing my thing. First, of course, I will ask my co-hosts, do you guys know anything about Rex Stout, the author, or his creation, Nero Wolfe?
No.
Oh, that's it. that's the whole thing.
Classic.
Okay, I was waiting for you to like expand on that or follow up in some way, but it's just like a hard no from you, huh?
Yeah, no.
Okay. To be honest, no. What I know is that we're reading.
Yes,
that is
yes.
that is what I'm aware of, is that this is some kind of like written work, and that is everything that I know about this media property. That's it.
All right, so Rex Stout was an author. He was born in 1886. He is dead. He died in 1975. And his most famous work is the Nero Wolfe detective novels. These are mysteries, detective novels of the vein of Agatha Christie's Poirot and Sherlock Holmes. These all take place in New York City for the most part, and
But
they all
like,
take place. Go ahead.
is it like turn of the century New York City? Like, are they contemporary to when he's writing them?
Exactly. They are always contemporary to exactly when he's writing them, including like Wolfe, the character will be reading books sometimes, and they will be books from that year, or they'll mention specific baseball games that happened during that year. Everything is very of that time and of New York at that time.
Okay.
Now, so he started writing these books in 1934, and the last one was published in 1975. So about 40 years of putting out these books. There are 46 books, so he put out one a year for basically 40 years.
Jesus fuck.
And these are about 200 to 250 page books. There's 33 novels, and then there's 39 novellas, which were packaged together in groups of either 2, 3, or 4.
That's a lot.
Yeah. In his
Well, remember, back then they didn't have video games to distract them or like Netflix. They weren't going to like conferences to talk about authorship. Like, he didn't really have much of an option aside from like get dysentery and write books.
I mean, those are two fair options.
Yeah, for sure. And they take a lot of time.
He was very involved in various different writing organizations as well. And he was kind of ahead of like counter propaganda during World War II, which took up a great deal of his time. But once World War II kind of ended, from like 1946 to 1966, he really like just honed in on writing. During that 20-year span, he wrote 32 of these books.
Jesus.
So yeah, he was very prolific, and really the like how good they were didn't go down for how much he wrote. Like, because the mysteries themselves are good, serviceable, sometimes above average, but what you really come to enjoy, or what the fans of the series enjoy, are the characters. And the more he wrote them, the more he like really understood how the characters would act and react, and it just became like more familiar. So some weird things about it: the characters don't age. They're always like the narrator Archie, who is like the assistant, and Archie is always 30 years old, and Wolfe is always 40 years old, no matter what. And they do some like odd things. Like there's one that takes place in like the late 1930s, and then there's one that takes place about 20 years later, and they have a character come back from that one, and he has aged, but they haven't. They don't really explain that. They just kind of like, yep, hey, remember we had that case, and they just kind of like gloss over it. Like he's an old man now, and they're the same age. So it's not like science fiction. It's not like they have like, oh, they're immortal. It's like, no, it just kind of, we wanted to bring that character back because we thought it would be interesting, so we did.
That's a little bit odd, admittedly.
Yeah, it's odd. Like the main like characters and side characters are always the same. They're the same age. They haven't changed, but New York changes, and like there's other like less main characters will get older, and like there are deaths. Like some of the side characters die, and then they're still dead. But it really wasn't written for like some sort of character arcs. People aren't learning lessons. They are who they are, and you're solving a mystery, and you're having fun doing that with them.
I'm kind of all about that.
Yeah. So the one I chose is from right in that really heavy period, 1956. It's one of the novellas, and it's kind of widely considered the best of the novellas. It's called Die Like a Dog, but there is no trigger warning. The dog does not die.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that up front, Keeghan. Yeah. I'm so glad that you've learned your lessons from earlier episodes.
So there is a dog in it, though, and it's a real fun read. It's a good little, very compact story that shouldn't take too long to read, and will give you kind of the essence of some of these characters.
Cool. I'm very excited. I love mystery as a genre, and I've actually it's not generally my go-to, but I've been particularly jamming on it over the past like 6 months. I think 90% of the things that I've read have been mysteries. So this is perfect.
And I need reading lessons to read good, so this will be good for me to practice.
I mean, one of the things about the Nero Wolfe novels is they definitely broaden your vocabulary. They like to use, especially like he has the Wolfe character who's the kind of the smart, detective kind of one, use fancy big words and thesaurus kind of words. And so if you read these, it will expand your vocabulary a little bit.
Okay, I will be sure to have dictionary.com opened on my...
Good idea. All right, Aaron, if you want to take us away with your usual.
All right, guys, I am excited to jump into this, so I will see you on the other side.
Bye, friends.
Bye.
Hey friends, it's me again with the ad break, or more importantly, the where you can put your money break. So this week we're about to talk a little bit about some anachronisms dealing with the time in which the Nero Wolfe books were written and the sort of lack of belief in a woman's personhood. So this week it seems only fitting that the place you can give your money, if you have a little bit of extra to give, is the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union. Their sort of goal is to take legal action when they think rights are being infringed upon, and to widen the protections guaranteed by the Constitution and make sure that they do, in fact, include everyone, that it is liberty and justice for all. For example, right now, one of the big fights that they're in the middle of, or are sort of undertaking, is getting accurate gender markers on IDs for people who are trans or non-binary, which is a fight that I think we can all get behind for sure. This kind kind of legislation would help mitigate harassment, which is huge, especially in trans and non-binary communities. So they do good work, and they put a lot of work in, and anybody who's been even close to the legal system knows it takes a lot of money to get into a legal battle. So you can help them out with that mission at aclu.org. As with any organization, giving a small amount on a regular schedule is probably the best way to give. So if you can throw them $5 a month or $2 a month or whatever, it makes a really big difference in kind of a lot of people's lives. As ever, if you do not have a little bit of extra to throw around, that is a-okay. Instead, go with our love, and we will catch you next time.
And welcome back. All right, Aaron, if you will do the traditional, what was the plot like?
Okay. So this, as we established, is a murder mystery. It starts off with the main character and the narrator is Goodwin, Archie Goodwin.
Yep.
And he works for Nero Wolfe, who is an inspector. So these guys are not part of the police department, but they're private investigators who investigate crimes. They just happen to walk across a crime, and it starts off with them. Goodwin is trying to return a coat to the person who stopped by their office. He lives in this apartment building. Goodwin comes across a dog that is just infatuated with him and follows him home. There is some hubbub about keeping the dog, and they end up doing so. And there is some entanglements with the actual police department. There is a man named Kramer and Stebbins, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And they are part of this investigation. There's kind of this power dynamic between the PIs and the police department. But essentially, the PIs are trying to work around the police department and not directly with them. They go back to this apartment building where a murder occurred, and we come to know that there are 4 tenants. There is Talento in the ground floor. He is a lawyer. Megan, who is on the 2nd floor, and he had moved in recently. Alond, who is on the 3rd floor, and not much is said about him except for he's a skinny guy. And then Shafé, who is an artist on the top floor. He has the most luxurious apartment.
And the most luxurious hair.
Yes, he is a looker.
That's, yeah. He like takes a moment to appreciate it, which I think is nice. He just stands there for a second like, damn, man, you got the whole thing going on, huh?
Yeah.
It's nice. It's a good moment.
Yeah, that was something. The first bit that we're fed is that Talento is going out and he's being trailed by the police. Our protagonist, Goodwin, goes up to him and says, hey, there's a murder and all. And if you're going out at midnight to do something, kind of not a good idea. So whoever you're meeting, just send me on the way with them and you go and do your thing and not make yourself more suspicious. And Talento is like, oh, wow, yeah, that's stupid of me. I'm going home. And you go meet with this lady that I was going to meet. Goodwin meets with her. They have a little bit of an interview. She's pretty nonchalant about things, but she does happen to know the dog, who we established is belonging to the murder victim. And there's not much more is said about that. There's a little bit of back and forth, a lot of like getting to know these characters through some interrogation, but it doesn't really come to a head until we find out that Megan is looking for his wife, still wife, not ex-wife, and that Shafé painted a portrait of her and couldn't seem to remember the person who was in it. Goodwin hunts down this portrait eventually and finds that it is none other than the lady that was met at midnight, Jewel Jones, who we find out is actually Mrs. Megan. This comes to a head with them all meeting together in Nero Wolfe's office, and we find out that indeed she is Mrs. Megan. Megan is dumbstruck with her there, and all the other guys are there as well. And we find out, and this feels kind of sudden to me, but also kind of makes sense and fits together, that Keeghan was the murderer because he killed them and there was an exchange of coats. And so the dog didn't recognize his smell and recognize the smell of Goodwin, who ended up with his coat because there was like a 3-coat swap or something. And sure, but I was just like, okay, at the end, and just accepted it and moved on with my life. And apparently Keeghan murdered him because he was going to... The reason why there was this motive is she kind of slept with all 3 of these men, probably, and one of them was going to out her presence to the husband, and he was trying to make a deal with like a raincoat for the outing her, and somehow Keeghan got pissed off and killed him because of that. Again, feels a little thin to me, but I'm also a bad reader, so if you guys read something deeper than that, then I'll let that happen. But I'm ready to talk about this at this point.
An excellent summary, as always, Aaron.
Definitely.
You are the queen of summaries. You've got it down.
All right. So to clarify, so earlier in the day, the murderer had switched coats with the protagonist, Archie. And the day before, somehow him and the murder victim, the murderer and the murder victim, had switched coats, which was why he was coming back to see him that day. So yeah, it's like a 3-coat switch. And so
this
when
guy can never figure out which coat is his fucking coat. Is the
exactly
his
exactly.
tragic flaw? The thing that gets him caught is that he cannot differentiate his coat from any other coat.
Yeah.
So when he switched coats with him, he didn't realize he was putting Mr. Goodwin's coat onto the dead body and not the murderer's coat on, because he had switched that one already. But the reason for the motive was the murder victim was basically blackmailing the wife, saying that you should come back and be with me. Like they had broken up like a couple of months before. Otherwise, I'll tell your husband where you are, which seems really slimy and terrible.
So I have so many things I want to talk about.
All right, hit me with the first one.
Okay, number 1, I started off really not liking the style of writing and the time period writing. It felt like an old black and white movie with like the way they said things and the dramatization of things. And sure, that's perfectly appropriate for the time based off of when it was written, but it was really hard. It was like going back to like a Renaissance era book. You know, it's like a totally different time. It felt weird. And at first, it felt kind of stilted. Like, I don't know if the writing changed, but there was like really short sentences at the beginning. It was like, he walked the dog and I walked down across the street and I saw something across the street. Like, it was very like, ugh. Like,
I had the same note, Aaron, that he had like a very sort of matter-of-fact, dry, observational style that is like good from a pacing perspective. Like things really kind of move along pretty quickly, but not so good for somebody who likes to dither in the details and get a little bit more description, which I am.
I think it got better as I was reading, and it is either I adapted to his style or he improved with getting into this story. But I remember like the first 2 paragraphs, I was like, what are we getting into? So yeah, that was interesting at first, but I kind of got into the time period and it felt more cohesive and it felt better to read after some time. But then I was very starkly reminded of the time period for other reasons.
Here it comes. Let me scroll to the associated note. Here we go.
And that was the objectifying women, and it was oh my God. So there's so much to get into here.
Oof.
So number 1, let's just hit the heart of it. There's one female character. So
Correct.
there's not even a second female character for this female character to talk to. So
Correct.
like already we're at like, okay, we're at ground zero.
And her function in the plot
Yeah.
is to sleep around, which obviously
Exactly.
makes her a bad person because how dare she?
Yeah.
Mm.
And everybody, like her only good qualities, I guess, is her charm and her allure. And it's commented on so much. It's like, this woman is so good at being charming and alluring, and I have to watch myself or I might end up accidentally sleeping with her.
And also, like, to top that with the fact that he talks about Archie, right? Our narrator talks about himself all the time, like, oh, I'm very attractive to women and dogs. Like,
Yeah.
cool, bud. Excellent.
Yeah.
It's very weird.
And then like him talking about like restraining her and then her body feeling warm to his touch. I was like, And the cherry on top was he's at her house and telling her to get dressed to come over. Don't wear red because Mr. Wolfe doesn't like red. Put on something yellow. It's like, the fuck?
Yeah. Yeah. And don't worry, because they did make sure to mention that she was wearing a blue negligee when he showed up. Like, fuck off. No, she wasn't. She was wearing sweatpants. Get bent. Ugh.
I did like that Mr. Talento had rainbow pajamas.
Yeah, that was pretty rad. I was into that.
Yeah, I was all about that. So anyway, we got into like this time period thing is a struggle for us. But what did we really like about this story?
I thought that there were some good notes of humor. My very first highlight in it actually was when he said, "I do not begin to tremble at the sight of Sergeant Pearly Stebbins," where he's like, "I'm not fucking afraid of this guy. Like he's fucking nothing to me." That's very good.
Yeah, and to top it off, on top of that, he is sarcastic as hell to everyone, and it comes off really well. I do like that.
Yeah. The other one that I highlighted that I thought was a really good example of humor was he was talking about how if he had continued his conversation with Wolfe any longer, he might have to resign, but the detective was there and he resigns only when we haven't got company. And then later on, he talks about resigning. So like, it's clear that this is a joke that goes back and forth between them and that it is like a stated thing that he like habitually resigns from service and they both know that he doesn't mean it, right? Which I think is very cute. And for me, builds up this kind of like friendship a little bit and kind of characterizes Wolfe, which is something that I don't think, I don't know if he's more of a character in like other things, but we really did not get a lot of him. This was like a very Archie-centric story. I don't know if that's the norm or not.
Yeah, Nero is very rough around the edges is the only thing I got out of him.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, you get more, in like the longer novels, obviously, you get a little bit more of Wolfe's character. And I mean, obviously, this is the third novella in a book of three, so like by the time you would have got to this one, you would have had a little bit more idea of their habits.
Mm-hmm.
Wolfe's habits, he is lazy is kind of the word they use for him. Basically,
I know because he's fat, so he has to be lazy because it's the 50s. So those things are required to go together.
Yeah.
But mostly he's lazy because he likes what he likes and he wants to do that. He wants to go up. It doesn't really mention it. It mentions it very briefly, but he spends 4 hours every day working on. He has orchids in a hothouse on the roof of the building, and he likes to he's constantly reading 2 or 3 books at the same time and doing crossword puzzles. It's like he has the things that he loves, and that's what he wants to be doing with his entire life. Unfortunately, the things he loves, including fine food, cost a very large amount of money. and he's found that the best way for him to make money is to be a kind of uh, a high paid detective. In most of the other books, he gets paid by rich people or large corporations, extravagant sums of money to solve murders that are problems for them in some way. So, but he doesn't want to solve these murders. He's not like one of the detectives who's like, oh, I really am interested in solving crimes, like I love the puzzle. It's like, no, this is my job. I do it so that most of the time I can do what I want to do.
So I have to say, I don't think I've ever related to a character more than this character now.
Oh my god, yeah. You were like, he just has to read and do crossword puzzles and garden. And I was like, fuck, same, God.
Yeah.
And eat good food and like be fat and late. Yes, yeah, that is what I want. Yes.
Yeah. And he is also eccentric in a couple ways. He really despises leaving the house. He's terrified of like moving vehicles. There's lots of scenes in lots of books where like if he has to be driven in a car, like he's like holding onto like the strap and he's like as tense like the entire time. He just doesn't trust them at all. He is also has a phobia of women. You might have gotten a little bit of it when Archie brought the lady home, and he's like, everybody in that building was men, and somehow you found a woman. And like a lot of times, like people will comment like, "Oh, you don't like women." And he's like, "That's not it. It's like it's more of a phobia. He like habitually fears them." And there's like a scene near the end where like she starts to get emotional and like he can't like he just like he does not want to deal with that
like, cuts
ever.
and runs.
He's just like, nope,
he can't
I'm
deal
out.
with quote a woman's eruptions. I was like,
yeah.
Oh my god, I forgot about that. The hysteria thing pissed me off too. Oh my god.
Now to be fair, in a lot of the other books, the female characters aren't nearly as one-dimensional and flighty and weirdly stereotypical to 1950s. Archie has a reoccurring kind of love interest named Lily, who is like a rich socialite, but she has a personality very similar to Archie's. She's like witty and sarcastic and like really like independent and her own person. She has money she inherited, and like her like life is finding like worthy causes to spend her time and money on.
A sort of Princess Di type figure.
Yeah, kind of. But like she's funny and and there is a lot more characters of her ilk in several of the books. This one, I think the novellas, you get less of them just because you get less of any sort of character depth in just like 60 pages. And Archie is always sarcastic and witty and just kind of contrary a lot. There's lots of scenes where he could have probably made it easier on himself if he wasn't as antagonistic to like the police, like to like Kramer and to Mr. Stebbins. Like the reason they're so hostile, one of the reasons to them is because he usually treats him like that with not really disdain, but like just on this side of it, it's like, I think I'm better than you, but I don't really hold it against you.
Reminiscent of a character, I'm trying to think of. I can't put my finger on it, but there's definitely like a TV show character or something that acts just like this, where just condescending and
I mean, it's almost like a Dr. House type vibe.
Yes.
Honestly. Like,
Yes.
oh, I'm smarter than you. And I mean, we both know that. But like, here you go, I guess. Like, oh, I don't really want to deal with people, but I'm like obligated to deal with people. So I guess I'm going to deal with people. Like, yeah, it's that same kind of
that's
energy.
definitely the vibe I was getting.
Yeah. I love these books because I like Archie. I like him being funny and him being sarcastic. And like if you like noticed how he the name of the painting was like Three Young Mares or something like that. And so like he decided in his narration to refer to her as one of the mares.
Yeah, I did notice that. That's a thing I noticed.
In most of the books, like something will happen and he will then kind of use that for descriptors for the rest of the book. Like there's one about a chess master, and so like he mentions like he just kind of like mixes in like chess descriptions for the rest of the book. Just for it just seems like for fun. Like in his mind, he's like, I'm just gonna give this person, I'm just gonna give this person a weird nickname, just because it entertains me.
Right.
So there were like an odd number of dicks, like a oddly large number of dicks in this story.
So they do use the word dick to describe, like, that was slang at the time for a detective.
Yeah, but there's also Richard Meegan, which confused me.
Who they call Dick, which is very so I made a gag that was not on the recording, but as soon as I got into this book, on the first page, before I'd seen any of this, I was like, oh my god, it's entirely about dicks. And then as it turns out, it was kind of entirely about dicks, but not in the way that I meant. I was just trying to get Aaron really psyched to get into this book.
Oh gosh. Yeah, like I figured it out. Like I knew that must mean police officer by context, but I was saying that everywhere. And then all of a sudden I started saying capital dicks. And I'm like, okay, this is not police officers anymore. What are we talking about?
Capital Dicks is the Magic Mike political spoof. It did not go over well, as you might have guessed. I had a word thing too. So Nero's name, right, it feels like allusion. It feels like it is trying to make a reference to the Nero that we all know, like Roman emperor, right? Nero. Especially since they made Wolfe his last name, and wolves are such like a big part of the sort of Roman mythology. Is that an intentional allusion? Like, do they ever explain anything more about that? Or are we just supposed to be like,
so he's from
this emperor that everyone got kind of pissed about?
He's from Montenegro.
Okay.
Like that's like near.
Yeah. It's like Eastern European.
Which is pronounced Black Mountain. So like Montenegro means Black Mountain, and so he's named after the mountain itself. And there's a couple of books. There's like a set of like 2 books where they kind of delve into his background just slightly, and they actually go to Montenegro like during when like the communists are in control of it.
Oh, fun.
In order to find who killed like his best friend. Like this is like one of the very few books where they leave like the house. He leaves the house itself. Yeah, so I assume from a previous conversation they had, that's how he knows that in like his like native tongue, Nero meant black. Sure.
Okay.
Did you? The one I had to look up was demi-rep.
Yeah. That one had me go for my dictionary as well. I actually made a note on that exact passage about the joke being that the woman who sings at the nightclub also sleeps with people.
Yeah.
It ended with the word blah.
Yeah.
By that point, I was like, all right, I see where this is going. Cool, good.
Yeah.
And the quote that follows that is, I resent that. I said manfully. When you call her that, smile. Like, come on. Yeah. Like, it's very gross.
So there's 46 books, and I started collecting them when I was a teenager, and I collected the last one 2 or 3 or 4 years ago, something like that. So I own all of these books. And I've read each of them like 3 or 4 times. About every like year or two, I'll just read through like all of them. And
I could see
kind
that.
of just
It seems like the kind of pulp that would be like, I don't know, like an old sweater that's too big, but it's still really cozy, right? Like, I can see where it would be like easy to fall into and become kind of like a comfort read.
Yeah, it's just it's fun to go and visit them. You didn't get to meet you got to meet Archie, basically just Archie and maybe a little bit of Kramer and a very small amount of Wolf. But the cook Fritz is funny in his own ways, like when they give him a little more time, like in the novels. And he mentioned Saul Panzer, which is one of the like 3 kind of hired hands if they need more people that they hire. And there's the things they like, the callbacks, like it was a very 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 brief in this one, but at the pre-climax, usually when Nero has figured something out, he'll like lean back and his like lips will push out and in as his like thinking very very hard, and that's in like almost all of the novels and novellas. And it's kind of like, it's like, he's figured, like you could tell from that point, it's like, he's figured it out. And then next is gonna come the showdown that usually happens when they have everybody come into the office as you would, and then have the reveal. But usually, like, instead of it just being an explanation of this is who did it and this is how they did it, usually it's, okay, I've figured out who did it. Now I have to somehow trick them into admitting that, or at least figure out a way to get evidence of that. Usually the scene in like his office is a necessary part. It's like I can't just like call them and be like, this is them, go pick them up, here's the evidence. It's like, I'm going to have to work at this. I'm going to have to set it up just right to get the right kind of payoff so that this person will confess, or this person will give me the evidence I need to convict this person.
That was not the case here, though, right?
I mean, it was kind of. I think he knew that the wife had more information that she was not giving, which she blurted out at the end, that she had talked to the murder victim and that he like had admitted that he had gone and met this guy and told him that he was going to steal his wife. So like he was playing for that reaction, to try to get that information to come out so as to resolve the case.
Well, and it's a little bit masturbatory in the way that Holmes always had to be a little bit the magician, right? And have like the big reveal at the end. And Poirot does the same thing as well, where like that big dramatic reveal where everyone's in the room together. That's like a trope of mystery novels, especially more like, I don't know, old school or pulpy mystery novels, I guess. Tend to have that like, I have to get everyone together to explain to everybody involved, even if they don't need to be here for this meeting at all, which like most of the people in that room did not. I still have to get everyone together to be like, I've put it all together, applaud my genius. Because that seems to be some of the thing that keeps these like genius detective characters going, is that people like admit that they are genius.
Yeah, I mean, you hear Archie talking about his Nero's ego, like
Mhm.
several times. And you know, like Archie also talks about his own several times. I think he's fairly self-aware of who he is very like comfortable with that. He understands that, like in several of the books, he understands that he has flaws and he has problems. But he like, I know my limitations, and I'm gonna kind of stay inside those. Um, Whereas Nero maybe doesn't quite have his defined in his mind of uh, like who he knows what he likes and he knows what he wants to do,
Mhm.
but he's not. I'd say maybe not quite as self-realized as Archie in some of the books.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely didn't see that here, right? Like
Yeah.
we got not as much of him, but it feels like that does make it a bit of a departure from some other sort of like detective style novels where generally that like detective is the guy, right?
Hmm.
And that's not as much the case here.
They did make they've made several movies and TV shows and radio plays. The most recent one that I can think of was on A&E. They had Timothy Hutton playing Archie and Maury Chalkin as Nero, and um, that ran for about 2 seasons, and they had an interesting sort of the cast was the same for every episode. They just took on different roles depending on which book they were doing. So like
Huh.
this week you
Sounds
would be the
really
murderer,
great.
next week you
That
might
sounds
be the
really
murder
confusing.
victim.
Yeah, like if I was like tuning in however often this was, and like I got used to the characters and all of a sudden everybody's playing different parts, I'd be like,
Like
what?
like Nero and Archie and like the reoccurring characters are always the same, but like
Okay,
the people involved in the murder are always the same actors, just kind of like scrambled around for whichever one they thought would best play that role that week.
Mm,
gotcha.
that makes sense.
I'm glad I could share it with you guys, though. It's one of my favorites. If one of you does read one of the longer ones, The Doorbell Rang is the best one. It's basically um, uh, Stout was having like a fight with the FBI because they accused him of being a communist.
Wow.
And so he
I'm
basically
shocked.
wrote this as kind of like an FU to the FBI. Um, and like apparently Hoover, because J. Edgar Hoover was the director of the FBI at the time, had
Right.
like a massive file on him because of this, that because he was all pissed off about this book.
Cool.
Yeah.
I appreciate the energy and spirit of that, and I also appreciate that that is the best one. Like his hate has fueled him into creating something that is even better than he normally would have. That's extremely gratifying to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Any final thoughts on this piece of work?
I appreciate your sharing it, Keegan. Despite my ever-present problems with the depiction of women in general, it was a really fun read. All said, I love a pulpy sort of detective novel.
Yeah, once I got past the first few pages and got into the rhythm of the writing, it definitely
Mhm.
was a very fun read. And I really like Archie. I think he's
He's
the
fun.
character I like the most out of all of it.
Yeah, for sure.
You're supposed to. I mean, that's like that's why you come back. You come back because you like Archie and you like seeing him interact with different people.
All right. Well, thanks for sharing, Keegan. What do we have in store next time?
Next time, Aaron, I believe it's you with our extremely unpronounceable friend. I'm afraid you're gonna have to give us the title of this one. Perfect. Yeah. Cool.
Awesome.
I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure that's what we have
Looking
next.
forward to that.
Yes. We'll catch you then, friends. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.